The cold wind howled as the rich man's luxury car pulled up near the dumpster. His expensive shoes crunched on the snow as he carried a heavy black bag. His face was emotionless. No guilt, no hesitation. He tossed the bag into the trash like it was nothing and walked away. Nearby, Rex, a trained K9 German shepherd, sniffed the air. His ears perked up. Something was wrong. The bag. It moved. A weak whimper escaped from inside. Rex's instincts kicked in. He rushed toward the dumpster, his paws slipping on the icy ground. When he reached the bag, he carefully tore it open with his teeth. What he saw made his fur stand on end. The moment Rex tore open the black bag, his sharp eyes locked onto a tiny, trembling puppy curled up inside, barely breathing. Its fur was matted with dirt, its ribs visible under its skin. It had clearly been starved for days. The puppy let out a weak, pitiful whine, its eyes half closed as if it had already given up on life. Rex's heart pounded. He had seen cruelty before, but this was different. This wasn't just neglect, this was deliberate. Someone had wanted this puppy to die. A deep growl rumbled in Rex's chest as he gently gripped the puppy's scruff, lifting it out of the trash. The little creature was so light, so fragile. He carried it carefully, his muscles tense, scanning the area for any sign of the rich man. But the car was already gone, leaving nothing but tire marks in the snow. Rex knew he couldn't stay here. The puppy needed warmth, food, and help fast. As he turned to leave, a sharp voice cut through the silence. "Hey, police dog, what are you doing here alone?" Rex recognized Officer Daniels, his handler, jogging toward him. The man's face twisted in confusion when he saw the puppy in Rex's mouth. "Where did you find that?" Rex dropped the puppy gently at Daniel's feet, barking urgently. The officer's eyes flicked to the torn black bag, then back to the dying puppy. His jaw clenched. "Someone dumped this poor thing like garbage?" Daniels quickly wrapped the shivering puppy in his jacket, his hands shaking with anger. "We need to get this little guy to the vet now." But as they rushed toward the police car, Rex suddenly froze. His ears twitched. A faint sound, footsteps crunching in the snow. Someone was watching them. From the shadows of an alley, a pair of cold, calculating eyes stared at the scene. A man in a dark coat, his face half hidden by a scarf, slowly stepped back into the darkness. He had seen everything, and he wasn't happy. The police car sped through the snowy streets, its sirens cutting through the night as Officer Daniels clutched the steering wheel with one hand while keeping the other firmly pressed against the tiny puppy's chest, feeling its faint heartbeat. Rex sat in the back seat, his body tense, his eyes constantly scanning the rear window. That shadowy figure from the alley, he knew they were being followed. The streetlights flickered as the car swerved around corners, casting eerie shadows that seemed to stretch and twist like living creatures. The puppy whimpered weakly, its breath shallow, and Daniels muttered under his breath, "Hold on, little guy. Just hold on." When they finally skidded to a stop outside the 24-hour animal clinic, Daniels burst through the doors, shouting for help. A young vet tech gasped at the sight of the emaciated puppy and immediately rushed them into an emergency room. Rex stayed close, his instincts screaming that danger wasn't far behind. As the vet worked frantically to stabilize the puppy, Daniels stepped outside to call for backup. Something about that black bag in the rich man's car didn't sit right with him. But just as he pulled out his phone, a sleek black sedan rolled past the clinic, its tinted windows hiding the occupants. Rex let out a low growl, his fur bristling. Inside the clinic, the puppy's condition worsened. The vet's voice was tight with urgency. "This isn't just starvation, he's been poisoned. Something slow-acting, deliberate." Daniel's blood ran cold. Who would do this, and why? Before he could process it, his radio crackled to life, a dispatcher's voice cutting through the static. All units, be advised, reports of a break-in at the city's animal shelter, multiple dogs missing. Rex's ears perked up. Missing dogs, a poisoned puppy, a rich man dumping a living creature like trash. This wasn't just cruelty, it was something bigger. And then the lights in the clinic flickered, once, twice, then darkness. The sudden blackout plunged the clinic into near total darkness, save for the dim emergency lights casting long, ominous shadows across the walls. Rex immediately positioned himself between the door and the treatment table where the puppy lay. His body rigid with tension, ears swiveling to catch every sound. Officer Daniels instinctively reached for his flashlight, its beam cutting through the dark as he moved closer to the vet and the fragile puppy. "What the hell just happened?" the vet whispered, her hands still working swiftly to stabilize the puppy despite the chaos. Outside, the wind howled like a wounded animal, rattling the clinic windows. Then, from somewhere in the back of the building, a metallic clang echoed, like someone had bumped into a tray of surgical tools. Rex's growl deepened, his teeth bared. Daniels radioed for backup again, but the static-filled silence that answered sent a chill down his spine. The comms were jammed. This wasn't a coincidence. The black sedan outside, the power cut, the break-in at the shelter, it was all connected. He turned to the vet. "Is there a back exit?" She nodded shakily, pointing down the hall. "But the puppy won't survive if we stop treatment now." A beat of silence. Then, from the hallway, slow, deliberate footsteps. Rex lunged forward just as a figure in black swung into the doorway, a gloved hand raising something that glinted in the flashlight's beam, a syringe. The intruder moved fast, but Rex was faster. His powerful body collided with the man's legs, sending him crashing into the wall. The syringe clattered to the floor, rolling toward Daniels, who snatched it up. The liquid inside was thick, murky. The same poison? Before he could react, the intruder scrambled up and bolted, vanishing into the shadows. The vet's voice was frantic. "We need to go now." She bundled the puppy into a makeshift sling, still attached to IV fluids, and they rushed for the back door. As they burst into the alley behind the clinic, the freezing air hit them like a slap. Abandoned dumpsters, flickering streetlights, and the distant sound of sirens, but no sign of the attacker. Then Rex froze. His nose twitched. A familiar scent, the rich man's cologne. It lingered near a set of fresh tire marks in the snow. Daniels's phone suddenly buzzed. A single, unsaved number flashing on the screen. The message was brief. "You don't know what you're dealing with. Walk away." The text message glowed ominously in Daniel's hand, its words a silent threat that hung in the frigid alley air. Rex pressed against his leg, a low growl rumbling through his body as his eyes darted between the shadows. The vet clutched the puppy closer, her breath coming in quick white puffs. "We can't stay here," she whispered, but Daniels was already moving, his mind racing. That scent, the rich man's cologne, it wasn't just familiar, it was specific. The same cloying mix of sandalwood and something metallic he'd noticed at high-profile charity galas. The kind where powerful men patted themselves on the back for their generosity, while their secrets festered underneath. They slipped through the maze of back streets, Rex leading the way, his nose guiding them away from main roads where that black sedan might be waiting. The puppy's breathing had stabilized slightly, but its tiny body still trembled violently in the vet's arms. Every few steps, Daniels glanced back, expecting to see figures emerging from the dark. Instead, his phone buzzed again. This time, a photo. His blood turned to ice. It was his own apartment building, taken minutes ago based on the timestamp. The message below: "Curiosity killed the K9." A sharp bark from Rex snapped his attention forward. The dog had stopped near a storm drain, his nose pressed to the grate. Even before Daniels crouched down, he smelled it. Copper, thick and fresh. Blood, lots of it. Using his flashlight, he peered through the gaps and immediately recoiled. Below, half submerged in the filthy water, was the body of a man in a security uniform. The animal shelter's logo was still visible on his bloodied shirt. The vet made a choked sound. Oh, God! Was he one of the guards from the break-in? Daniels finished grimly. His fingers tightened around his gun. This wasn't just about stolen dogs anymore. Someone was covering their tracks with murder. Then Rex stiffened. A new scent. Not cologne this time, something chemical, like antiseptic and burning fur. The memory hit Daniels like a punch. A case file from last year, rumors of a black market lab experimenting on animals. They'd never found proof. Until now. From the darkness ahead came a sound that made the puppy whimper. The quiet click of a round being chambered in a gun. The metallic click of the gun being cocked echoed through the alleyway like a death sentence. Officer Daniels instinctively shoved the vet behind a dumpster, his own weapon drawn as Rex positioned himself in front of them, teeth bared in a silent snarl. The darkness seemed to pulse around them, alive with unseen threats. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then a voice slithered through the shadows, smooth, cultured, and utterly devoid of remorse. "You should have listened to the warning, officer." The rich man's voice. A streetlight flickered 30 feet ahead, illuminating the man's tailored overcoat and polished shoes. He held no weapon. That click had come from the two armed figures flanking him, professional security, their faces obscured by tactical gear. But Daniel's attention locked onto what the rich man was holding. A leather-bound ledger, its edges stained dark. The man smiled, tapping the cover. "Do you know how much a purebred German Shepherd fetus sells for on the underground market? Or how much pharmaceutical companies pay for canine organ tissue?" The puppy in the vet's arms whimpered, as if sensing the evil in those words. Rex's growl deepened, his muscles coiled to attack, but Daniels placed a restraining hand on his back. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and that ledger, it was the key to everything. The rich man sighed. "I did try to dispose of the evidence, cleanly." His gaze flicked to the black bag they'd taken the puppy from. "But you just had to play hero." He nodded to his men. "Retrieve the specimen, dispose of the witnesses." As the armed men advanced, a sudden roar of engines erupted from both ends of the alley. Headlights blazed to life. Police cruisers, but not from Daniels' precinct. These were unmarked, their officers in plain clothes. The rich man's smirk faltered. A new voice cut through the chaos, one Daniels recognized with a surge of hope. "Federal Wildlife Crimes Task Force, drop your weapons." But the rich man was already moving, clutching that damning ledger as he ducked into a waiting car. Rex exploded into motion, tearing after him, but the sedan peeled out with a screech of tires. The last thing Daniel saw was the man's cold smile through the window as he raised a phone to his ear. Then the world turned to fire. The explosion blew out the alley's walls, sending Daniels crashing to the ground as debris rained down. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Rex's frantic barking. Not from the chaos ahead, but from the storm drain where the dead guard lay. Something glinted in the wreckage. A USB drive clutched in the corpse's stiff fingers, and on it a single word scrawled in blood. The USB drive felt like a live grenade in Daniel's palm as he crouched in the smoking ruins of the alley, its metallic surface still warm from the explosion. Around them, federal agents swarmed, their shouts muffled by the persistent ringing in his ears. Rex pressed against his side, his body vibrating with tension, eyes locked on the tiny device, as if he too understood its significance. The vet was hunched over the puppy a few feet away, her hand steady despite the chaos as she adjusted its IV line. Blood streaked her coat. Whether hers or the puppy's, Daniels couldn't tell. He turned the drive over. That single word, kennel, scrawled in what was unmistakably the dead guard's handwriting, changed everything. It wasn't just a location, it was a code name. Daniels had heard whispers during his years in Vice about high-stakes animal trafficking rings that operated under veterinary fronts. But this was something darker, more organized. The rich man's casual mention of German Shepherd fetuses and organ tissue wasn't just bravado, it was a confession. A federal agent with a cyber unit badge yanked the drive from his hand. "This goes straight to our forensic team." His tone brooked no argument. But as the agent turned, Daniels caught the flicker of recognition in his eyes when he saw the word on the drive. A fraction of a second too long. A micro-expression of fear. Rex's sudden snarl made Daniels look down. The dog was sniffing at the agent's shoes. Expensive leather, impeccably polished, just like the rich man's. The vet gasped. The puppy's crashing again. Her voice cracked with panic. "I need epinephrine, now!" As Daniels lunged to help, his radio, silent since the clinic, crackled to life with a burst of static. Then a voice, distorted but unmistakably the rich man's. "You're chasing shadows, officer. The kennel has eyes everywhere." Across the street, a surveillance camera pivoted smoothly to focus on them. The surveillance camera's unblinking lens focused on them with eerie precision, its mechanical whir barely audible over the chaos of federal agents securing the bomb site. Daniels felt the weight of unseen eyes crawling over his skin as Rex positioned himself between his handler and the camera. His hackles raised in a silent challenge. The federal agent with the polished shoes had vanished into the crowd, taking the USB drive with him, along with any hope of immediate answers. The vet's hands moved frantically over the puppy, administering emergency drugs as its heartbeat stuttered on the portable monitor. A drop of sweat slid down her temple despite the freezing air. "I can't stabilize him here," she said through clenched teeth. "Whatever poison they used is accelerating." Daniel's radio crackled again, this time with the dispatcher's voice, real, undistorted. "All units, 1078 at the old Sinclair warehouse. Reports of, oh God, dogs, hundreds of them." The transmission dissolved into static, but the coordinates flashed on his screen. The exact location marked as kennel in their case files last year. A place they'd raided and found empty. Until now. Rex let out a sharp bark, his nose pointed toward a black van idling at the alley's mouth. Not federal issue. The side door slid open just enough to reveal a familiar face, Mia Rodriguez, the investigative reporter who'd been digging into missing shelter dogs for months. Her usually pristine blazer was stained with dirt and what looked like blood. "Get in, if you want the truth," she hissed. "They've already killed 3 of my sources." As they piled into the van, Daniels noticed the stack of files at Mia's feet. Photographs of politicians, judges, even high-ranking police officials, all at some kind of underground auction where the lots weren't art or jewelry, but dogs in cages, purebreds, mutts, puppies, each tagged with barcodes. The last photo made his stomach lurch. The rich man shaking hands with the chief of police over a champagne toast. A terrified German Shepherd pup in a display case between them. Mia slammed her laptop open. "The kennel isn't a place, it's a membership." The screen showed a dark web portal with a Mastiff logo, real-time bids appearing for K977, police trait guaranteed. Rex whined, pawing at the image. It was his own service photo. The van's rear door suddenly buckled inward with a deafening crash. Something heavy had hit them, then another, and another. Gunshots. The van's tires screeched against the asphalt as another volley of bullets tore through the metal siding, the sharp reports of gunfire echoing through the abandoned industrial district. Sunlight streamed through the fresh bullet holes and jagged beams, illuminating the swirling dust inside the vehicle. Mia's hands clenched the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity, her foot pressing the accelerator to the floor as they swerved around piles of broken pallets and rusted machinery. The puppy's weak, pitiful cries cut through the roar of the straining engine, its tiny body racked with convulsions in the vet's lap. The vet's hands moved frantically, adjusting the makeshift IV line while trying to keep the fragile creature stable. Daniels braced himself against the passenger seat, one arm wrapped protectively around Rex, who stood with his muscular body tensed for action despite the chaos surrounding them. The confidential files Mia had revealed were now scattered across the van's floor. Photographs of well-dressed men and women at what appeared to be some sort of high society event flashing by with each violent swerve. Except the centerpieces at this gathering weren't works of art or fine wines, but terrified dogs in display cages, their eyes wide with fear. Mia shouted over the engine's roar, her voice strained with urgency. They're not just selling dogs for pets or fighting. She fumbled with one hand while keeping the other on the wheel, grabbing a crumpled stack of lab reports from the dashboard and thrusting them toward Daniels. Look at the blood work results. This goes way beyond anything we imagined. Daniels caught the papers as the van hit a pothole, sending them all lurching sideways. The documents were filled with complex molecular diagrams and chemical formulas that swam before his eyes. But one line stood out in glaring red ink, circled repeatedly as if to emphasize its importance. Canine-derived neuropeptides, 95% human compatible. His blood turned to ice in his veins as the implications crashed over him. This wasn't just illegal breeding or dogfighting. This was something far more sinister. A cold, calculated program of cross-species medical experimentation. The rich man's casual mention of organ harvesting took on new, horrifying meaning. The van suddenly skidded around a sharp corner, throwing everyone violently against the side panels. Through the cracked windshield, the derelict Sinclair warehouse complex came into view. A sprawling monument to decay with broken windows like sightless eyes staring blankly across the empty lots. The chain-link fence surrounding the property glinted with vicious coils of razor wire at the top. But what made Daniel's breath catch was the parking lot. Instead of being empty, as such an abandoned location should be, it was filled with luxury vehicles, Mercedes, Bentleys, Range Rovers, their polished surfaces gleaming obscenely in the afternoon sunlight. Mia killed the engine behind a stack of rusted shipping containers, the sudden silence almost deafening after the chaos of their escape. "Auction day?" she whispered, her voice thick with disgust. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. From beside Daniels, Rex let out a sound he'd never heard from his partner before, a deep, mournful howl that seemed to carry centuries of canine sorrow in its tones, raising the hairs on Daniel's arms and neck. The vet instinctively clamped a hand over the puppy's mouth to muffle its weak whimpers, her eyes wide with terror. Through the warehouse's massive, gaping, loading bay doors, shadows moved in the dim interior, figures in tailored suits and expensive dresses milling about with wine glasses in hand. The occasional glint of surgical steel reflected the sparse lighting. And the cages. Dear God, the cages. row upon row of them stacked haphazardly throughout the vast space, some barely large enough for the animals inside to turn around. The occasional movement from within the shadows of the crates sent a fresh wave of nausea through Daniels. He reached for his sidearm, his fingers brushing the cool metal of his service weapon just as his phone buzzed violently in his pocket. The preview screen showed an unknown caller ID with a message that turned his stomach. "Walk away now, and the K9 lives." Attached was a live video feed showing Rex's kennel back at the police station, or at least a perfect replica of it. A figure dressed entirely in black stood just outside the cage, a large syringe filled with ominous dark liquid held ready in one gloved hand. Mia grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "They have your dog," she breathed, her face pale. Daniels stared at the screen, then at the very real, very alive Rex pressed against his side, his partner, his friend, his loyal companion through countless dangerous operations. The realization struck him like a physical blow. They don't know Rex is with me. The feed wasn't live at all. It was recorded footage from before the clinic incident, carefully edited to appear current. Which meant a metallic scream echoed across the lot as the massive warehouse doors began to slide shut with grinding finality. From inside the building, a sudden chorus of panicked barks and howls erupted, the sound of dozens of terrified animals rising in a cacophony of fear. Then, cutting clearly through the noise, a voice over the PA system announced with chilling professionalism, "Lot 47, former K9 unit, German Shepherd. Harvest ready. Bidding will commence at $50,000. Rex went completely rigid beside Daniels, a low, dangerous vibration building in his chest. Because the voice they'd just heard over the speaker system wasn't some anonymous auctioneer. It was the voice of Officer Jenkins, Rex's original handler before Daniels, the man who'd trained him from a puppy, the officer who'd supposedly died in the line of duty 2 years ago. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife ever could. Mia grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "They have your dog," she breathed, her face pale. Daniels stared at the screen, then at the very real, very alive Rex pressed against his side. His partner, his friend, his loyal companion through countless dangerous operations. The realization struck him like a physical blow. They don't know Rex is with me. The feed wasn't live at all. It was recorded footage from before the clinic incident, carefully edited to appear current. Which meant a metallic scream echoed across the lot as the massive warehouse doors began to slide shut with grinding finality. From inside the building, a sudden chorus of panicked barks and howls erupted, the sound of dozens of terrified animals rising in a cacophony of fear. Then, cutting clearly through the noise, a voice over the PA system announced with chilling professionalism, "Lot 47, former K9 unit, German Shepherd. Harvest ready. Bidding will commence at $50,000. Rex went completely rigid beside Daniels, a low, dangerous vibration building in his chest. Because the voice they'd just heard over the speaker system wasn't some anonymous auctioneer. It was the voice of Officer Jenkins, Rex's original handler before Daniels, the man who'd trained him from a puppy. The officer who'd supposedly died in the line of duty 2 years ago. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife ever could. The massive warehouse doors ground shut with a metallic shriek that echoed across the abandoned industrial complex, sealing away the horrors within like a tomb being closed. Rex pressed against Daniel's leg with such intensity that the officer could feel the dog's entire body vibrating. Not with fear, but with a barely contained fury that radiated through every muscle and sinew. His lips were drawn back in a soundless snarl, revealing glistening canines, while his amber eyes burned with an almost human intensity, as they remained locked on the warehouse. The voice of his former handler, a man they'd all mourned, a man whose name was engraved on the precinct's memorial wall, still seemed to hang in the cold air around them, its betrayal cutting deeper than any physical wound could. Mia's grip on Daniel's arm tightened to the point of pain, her nails digging through the fabric of his jacket as she stared at the warehouse with wide, disbelieving eyes. Her breath came in short, panicked bursts that fogged in the chilly air. "This auction isn't for rich pet collectors or underground dogfighters," she whispered, her voice trembling with revelation. "Look at the license plates. Really look at them." Daniels followed her gaze across the parking lot filled with luxury vehicles that had no business being at a derelict warehouse. The plates weren't standard issue. These were specialized government and corporate tags. His eyes tracked from one to another, his stomach dropping like a stone as he recognized the logos: Biogen Dynamics, Prelia Pharmaceuticals, even Blackwater Security Consulting. The realization struck him like a physical blow. This wasn't some black market pet sale or illegal breeding operation. This was a highly organized, well-funded procurement operation with buyers from the highest levels of corporate and military power. The puppy and the vet's arms chose that moment to convulse violently, its tiny body arching in pain as another wave of whatever poison they'd given it coursed through its system. The vet pressed 2 fingers to its throat, her face going ashen as she monitored its erratic pulse. "We're losing him," she said quietly, her professional calm barely masking her horror. "Whatever cocktail they used isn't just poison. It's designed to preserve tissue integrity during transport. They're essentially prepping him for harvest while he's still alive." The distant wail of approaching sirens cut through the tension, but these weren't police vehicles. The distinct triple-tone pattern marked them as private corporate security, the kind of high-end paramilitary forces used to protect sensitive assets. Mia's laptop screen flickered to life, displaying a grainy video feed she'd hacked from the warehouse's internal security system. The image showed row upon row of stainless steel cages, illuminated by the cold, clinical light of surgical lamps, each containing dogs in various states of distress, some heavily sedated and listless, others trembling in terror, their eyes wide and whites showing. At the center of the warehouse floor stood a raised platform like some grotesque auction block, where a magnificent German shepherd, muzzled and strapped spread-eagled to a stainless steel table, struggled weakly against its restraints as a figure in a full biohazard suit prepared an IV line. Rex let out a choked, almost human-sounding whine that sent chills down Daniel's spine. The dog on that table was Coda, Rex's littermate, believed killed in action alongside Jenkins 2 years ago during the precinct bombing. The same attack that had made Rex a hero when he dragged 3 officers to safety. The same attack that now appeared to have been anything but accidental. Daniel's police radio suddenly crackled to life with a voice that should have been comforting. Captain Harris, his commanding officer. "Daniels, abort your location immediately. Federal task force is en route to handle the situation." But the timing was too perfect, the message too convenient, and the so-called federal agents who'd taken the damning USB drive had vanished without filing any reports or processing any evidence. Mia's laptop screen suddenly flashed red as her hacking program triggered an urgent alert. Her face went pale as death as she read the notification. "Oh, God, they're not just selling the dogs themselves," she breathed, her voice shaking. "They're selling trained behavior patterns." The schematic that popped up on screen showed a colorful brain scan overlay, canine neural pathways being mapped, digitized, and cataloged with terrifying precision. Her next words turned Daniel's blood to ice. "They've found a way to extract and replicate K9 instincts, for direct human application. The implications exploded in Daniel's mind like a flashbang grenade. Imagine Special Forces soldiers with a police dog's tracking ability and obedience, assassins with a bloodhound's scent memory and loyalty conditioning. The rich man in his expensive car hadn't been carelessly disposing of evidence when he threw that black bag in the dumpster. He'd been delivering a prototype to some secret lab, and the puppy had been meant to die quietly in the trash after serving its purpose. The approaching security vehicles screeched to a halt just yards from their hiding spot, their blacked-out windows revealing nothing of the threats within. Rex suddenly lunged forward with a roar, so powerful it shook the van's walls, his focus locked on the narrow gap of the closing warehouse doors. Because in that final sliver of visibility, they all saw it simultaneously. The rich man stepping onto the auction platform, holding a leash attached to a familiar studded collar. The dead guard's German shepherd, alive, obedient, and staring directly at them with eyes that held a terrifying, calculating intelligence no dog should possess. The hybrid had been perfected, and judging by the way its lips curled back in a mockery of a smile, it recognized them. Every one of them. The hybrid German shepherd's piercing gaze locked onto them through the van's windshield with an intelligence so profoundly unnatural that Daniels felt primal terror slither up his spine like a living thing. Its lips curled back in an expression that froze the blood in his veins. Not the instinctive snarl of a threatened animal, but something far more calculated, more disturbingly human in its cold assessment. The creature's yellowed canines gleamed under the warehouse's harsh fluorescent lights as its muzzle twisted into what could only be described as a smile. The kind of smile a predator might give prey it knows cannot escape. The rich man adjusted his grip on the reinforced leash, his polished Oxfords clicking against the concrete floor as he paraded the hybrid forward like some grotesque show dog at a championship event. Behind them, the assembled auction attendees, men and women in tailored suits and lab coats, their faces illuminated by the glow of tablets displaying bidding numbers, leaned forward with undisguised hunger. The glint in their eyes wasn't mere curiosity, but something far more disturbing, the avarice of collectors about to acquire a priceless specimen. Mia's laptop screen flickered violently as another encrypted file forced its way through her hacked connection. The words, Project Cerberus Phase 3, burning crimson across the display. The document scrolled automatically, revealing diagrams of neural graphs and synaptic mapping that made Daniel's stomach churn. "My God," Mia breathed, her fingers trembling above the keyboard. They've moved beyond just implanting canine instincts into human subjects. She zoomed in on a brain scan comparison showing eerie similarities between human and canine neural activity patterns. They're reverse engineering the process, putting human cognitive patterns into dogs. That's why it's looking at us like that. It doesn't just recognize us, it understands us on a human level. A weak, wet gurgle drew their attention back to the vet cradling the dying puppy, its tiny chest hitched in one final, shuddering breath before going terrifyingly still. The vet's hands, usually so steady during surgeries, trembled visibly as she pressed 2 fingers against its throat, waiting, hoping for a pulse that wouldn't come. When she looked up, her eyes told them everything. The poison. It wasn't just a kill, she whispered hoarsely. It was a preservative cocktail. This puppy wasn't discarded. It was rejected from their program, not viable for whatever hellish experiments they're running. Her fingers gently closed the puppy's clouded eyes as a single tear tracked down her cheek. Rex stood like a statue beside Daniel's, every muscle in his powerful body locked in tension so extreme that faint tremors ran through his fur. His unblinking stare remained fixed on his littermate Coda, The dog they'd all believed dead, still strapped to that stainless steel table, his once glossy coat now matted with sweat and fear. The hybrid at the rich man's side suddenly cocked its head in a gesture so perfectly human it was chilling, its ears twitching as if catching a sound beyond human hearing range. Then, with speed that defied comprehension, it launched itself at the auctioneer standing nearby. The attack wasn't the wild frenzy of an aggressive dog, but a precise, calculated strike, its jaws closing around the man's wrist with surgical accuracy, the crunch of bone audible even from their hiding spot. It didn't maul or shake its victim like a normal animal would. It applied exactly enough pressure to incapacitate before releasing and stepping back, blood dripping from its maw in thick strings as it calmly resumed its place beside the rich man. The auction attendees gasped and recoiled, all except the rich man himself, who didn't so much as flinch. Instead, his lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Ah," he murmured, patting the hybrid's head as one might praise a clever child. "It seems Subject Gamma still exhibits some behavioral inconsistencies we need to work through." The way he said it, like discussing a minor software glitch rather than a living creature's violent outburst, made Daniel's hands curl into fists. The hybrid's ears twitched at the sound of its designation. Then, with deliberate slowness, it turned its massive head back toward their van, toward Rex specifically, and emitted a low, guttural vocalization that stopped Daniel's heart for a full 3 beats. Because that sound wasn't a growl or a whine or any noise a dog should make. It was an attempt at speech. A single, mangled but unmistakable word. "Roar, Rex." The way its tongue struggled around the syllables only made it more horrifying, like listening to something trapped between species trying desperately to communicate. Outside the warehouse, the security teams moved with sudden, chilling synchronization, forming a perfect perimeter around the building. Not to shut down the illegal auction, Daniels realized with dawning horror, but to protect it. These weren't ordinary mercenaries. Their movements were too coordinated, too precise, their weapons too advanced. Private military, certainly, but of a caliber usually reserved for guarding nuclear facilities or heads of state. Then the shadows in the loading bay shifted, and a new figure emerged. A man in a stained lab coat holding a syringe filled with glowing blue liquid that pulsed faintly in the dim light. His face was obscured by a surgical mask, but the way he carried himself, the familiar set of his shoulders, sent Rex into a frenzy even before the man spoke. "Reset protocol initiated," the scientist announced calmly, raising the syringe toward the hybrid. Rex lost all control. With a roar that shook the van's frame, he launched himself through the partially open door before Daniels could grab his harness. Because that wasn't just some anonymous researcher. The way his eyes crinkled above the mask, the distinctive scar across his brow, Daniels would recognize that face anywhere, even after 2 years of believing it was gone forever. Officer Jenkins, Rex's original handler, the man who had supposedly died in that precinct bombing, alive, unharmed, and holding the leash of something far more monstrous than any hybrid. The moment Rex's paws hit the pavement, time seemed to slow. The hybrid, Subject Gamma, snapped its head toward him, its 2 intelligent eyes narrowing with recognition. Behind it, Jenkins froze, the syringe in his hand glinting under the harsh warehouse lights. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then chaos erupted. Security teams surged forward, weapons raised, but Rex moved like a shadow. Fast, silent, lethal. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He simply struck, barreling into the nearest guard with enough force to send the man crashing into a stack of crates. The hybrid lunged in response, its movements eerily precise, not like an animal fighting for dominance, but like a soldier following orders. It went straight for Rex's throat, jaws wide, but at the last second Rex twisted, his teeth clamping down on the hybrid's foreleg instead. A sickening crack echoed through the warehouse as bone splintered. The hybrid didn't yelp, it didn't retreat. It laughed, a wet, gurgling sound that sent ice through Daniel's veins. Jenkins' voice cut through the noise, sharp and commanding. "Gamma, stand down." The hybrid immediately stilled, though its eyes burned with something dangerously close to defiance. Jenkins stepped forward, his lab coat flapping, the syringe still clutched in his hand. His gaze locked onto Rex, and for the first time, Daniel saw the flicker of emotion in the man's eyes. Regret? Guilt? "You weren't supposed to survive that explosion, Rex," Jenkins said softly. "You were too smart, too unpredictable. But Gamma was perfect." Daniels finally reached them, his gun trained on Jenkins. "You sold out your own dogs, your own partner." Jenkins' smile was thin, humorless. "I advanced them. Do you have any idea what we've accomplished? Canine intelligence merged with human reasoning. Imagine a soldier who never questions orders but can strategize like a general. A K9 unit that doesn't just track sense, it thinks like the criminals it hunts." Behind him, the auction attendees were fleeing, their prized specimens forgotten in the face of violence. Mia and the vet rushed to free the caged dogs, their whimpers and barks rising in a desperate chorus. Rex didn't take his eyes off Jenkins. His body was coiled, ready to spring, but something held him back, memories, maybe, of training together, of trust. Jenkins sighed and raised the syringe. "I can't let you ruin this, Rex." The hybrid moved faster than Daniels could react. It lunged, not at Rex, but at Jenkins, its jaws closing around the man's wrist. The syringe clattered to the ground blue liquid seeping into the concrete. Jenkins screamed, but the sound was cut short as the hybrid twisted, its unnatural strength sending him crashing to the floor. For a moment, no one moved. Then the hybrid, Gamma, looked up at Rex, its lips pulled back, not in a snarl, but in something almost like apology. And then it ran, vanishing into the night like a ghost. Moral lesson: loyalty cannot be engineered. It cannot be bought or sold. True loyalty is born of trust, of love, of recognizing the value of a soul, whether it beats in a human heart or a dog's. The moment we try to control it, to own it, we lose it forever. The surviving dogs were rescued. The rich man was arrested. Jenkins survived, but the light in his eyes was gone, broken by the betrayal of the very creature he'd sought to perfect. As for Rex, he sat beside Daniels watching the sunrise paint the sky in gold and pink. His tail gave a single, quiet wag. Some bonds no science could ever break.